My brothers, I have understood certainly the last 2 or 3 days that unfortunately we suffered a blow from divine mercy. I understood even that one of the many indications of a verse concerning the people of rebellion looks to us. It is this: but when they forgot the warning they had received, on a sudden we called them to account. That is, when they forgot the instruction and advice with which we have warned them and did not act in accordance with it, we took hold of them and afflicted them with disaster. Yes, recently we were prompted to write a treatise on the meaning of sincerity. In truth, it was a most luminous and exalted rule of brotherhood, a sacred principle which allows 10 men to withstand calamities and events which normally could only be withstood with the strength of tens of thousands. But, unfortunately we, and foremost myself, did not act in accordance with the warning. In accordance with the elusive meaning of the verse, according to the science of Jifir, the value of "we called them to account" is 1352. We were arrested on the same date. Some of us suffered a slap dealt by divine compassion. Others suffered not such a blow, but were included in these tribulations in order to be a solace to our brothers who did suffer it, so that it might be a means of earning reward and profit. For 3 months, I was barred from mixing with others, but for the past 3 days, I have been able to learn my brothers' states of mind. An unimaginable incident had occurred opposed to the meaning of sincerity, involving brothers whom I had supposed to be the most sincere. I understood from this that an elusive meaning of the verse, but when they forgot the warning they had received, on a sudden we called them to account, looked to us from afar. For the people of misguidance, for whom the verse was revealed, it is punishment, but for us it is a blow from divine compassion in order to train our souls as atonement for sins, and so that we may raise our spiritual degrees. Evidence that we suffered this blow because we did not completely appreciate the value of the divine bounty we had received is that we were not contented with our sacred service of the Qur'an through the Risale-i Nur, a most sacred striving in God's way, which receives the effulgence of greater sanctity through the mystery of the legacy of prophethood and is a means to attaining the essence of the way of the companions. Through my severe warnings on several occasions, the wish to join a Sufi order was forestalled, the advantages of which are very few for us at the moment and could possibly have caused us much harm in this situation. Otherwise, both our unity would have been destroyed, and it would have caused both differences in ideas which would have reduced the value of 4 alifs, which through solidarity is 1111, to 4, and mutual antipathy, which would have reduced our strength to nothing. The author of the Gulistan, Sheikh Sadi Shirazi, relates, I saw one of the people of the heart in a tekke while occupied with his spiritual journey. Several days later, I saw him among students in the madrasa. I asked him why he had left the effulgent tekke and come to the religious school. He replied that there everyone could save themselves if they were successful, whereas here in the religious school persons of high aspiration were trying to save many others besides themselves. Nobility and high endeavor were theirs, virtue and exertion were theirs. That was why he went there. Sheikh Sadi wrote a summary of this in his Gulistan. So, if the small matter of students parsing verbs is superior to the recitations in the tekkes, since the Risale-i Nur teaches in the clearest and most certain manner the sacred truths of belief of the confession of faith, I believe in God and His angels and His books and His prophets and in the last day, and silences the most abject atheists and obstinate philosophers to abandon it or cause its activities to come to a standstill or not to be content with it, and desiring the Sufi way to enter the dissolved Sufi tekkes without asking permission of the Risale-i Nur is entirely wrong and shows how much we deserve this blow of divine compassion. Said Nursi. A warning. 2 short stories. The first. 15 years ago, when a prisoner of war in the north of Russia, I was being held together with 90 other officers in a large factory. Numerous arguments and disturbances arose due to the discomforts and oppressive conditions. I used to pacify them since they all had great respect for me. I appointed 4 or 5 officers to keep the peace, telling them, whenever you hear an uproar, go there and help whichever side is in the wrong. It is a fact that, with this precaution, a stop was put to the noise. They asked me why I helped those who were in the wrong. In reply, I told them, people in the wrong are unfair. They do not give up a single benefit for the sake of public peace 40 times greater. Whereas the person who is in the right is fair. He sacrifices and waives his own rights worth little for the advantage of his friend, which is part of the public peace and worth much. The disturbance ceases and peace is restored. The 90 people in this world can be comfortable. If the person in the right is helped, the noise would increase even more. In communal life of this sort, the general good takes precedence. And so, my brothers, in this communal life of ours, do not say, I am fed up with my brother, for he has been unfair to me. To do so is a great error. If such a friend of yours has caused you a little harm, your being angry with him causes us harm of high cost. It is possible it would even cause excessive harm to the Risale-i Nur. But, praise be to God, with our friends being prevented from repeatedly going to be questioned, no harm came to our powerful and rightful defenses. Otherwise, like getting something as tiny as a fly's wing in one's eye, or a spark falling into gunpowder, due to a little pique, brothers who are vexed with one another can cause a great deal of harm. Second story. There was once an elderly woman who had 8 sons. She gave each of them a loaf of bread from the loaves she had, but none remained for herself. So each of them gave her half his loaf. She then had 4 loaves, while theirs was reduced to half a loaf. My brothers, I feel in myself half the pains of the share in this calamity of each of the 40 of you. I take no notice of my own hardships. One day I felt excessively afflicted and studied my previous position, wondering if I was paying the penalty for some error I had committed. I saw that I had no part at all in the fomenting and incitements of this calamity. On the contrary, I had employed every possible means to avoid it. That means it's a divine decree. It has been planned against us by intriguers over the past year and made inevitable. It was not possible to avoid it. It was inevitable that we should be embroiled in it. 100,000 thanks to Almighty God that He reduced the calamity from 100 to 1. In consequence of this fact, therefore, do not blame me, saying, we are suffering this disaster because of you. Forgive me, rather, and pray for me. And do not criticize each other, saying, if you had not done such and such, this would not have happened. For example, with one of our brothers mentioning 2 or 3 signatures, the plan the mischief makers were hatching in order to embroil numerous people in a calamity was restricted and many were saved from it. It was the cause not of harm, but of great advantage. It resulted in many innocent people being saved from this disaster. Said Nursi. This piece is very valuable. Everyone may benefit from it as far as the second point. In connection with certain unpleasant situations which come about in Eskişehir prison, not through bad morality, but because of the distress, this is about one fine point of a well-known verse that has remained undisclosed and a point concerning good behavior. First point. Out of His perfect munificence, compassion, and justice, Almighty God has included in good works an immediate reward, and in bad actions an immediate punishment. He has included in good works spiritual pleasures that recall the rewards of the hereafter, while in bad works are spiritual penalties which recall the torments of hell. For example, love between believers is a praiseworthy action for the people of faith. Included in that good works are a spiritual pleasure, a gratification, and ease of mind that recall the physical rewards of the hereafter. Anyone who refers to his heart will feel this pleasure. And for example, enmity and hostility between believers are an evil that cause noble spirits to feel torments of the conscience enough to overwhelm the heart and spirit. I myself have experienced in perhaps more than 100 times, when I have felt enmity towards a believing brother, I have suffered such torments that it has left me in no doubt that it was the immediate punishment for my evil deed. And for example, to be respectful towards those worthy of respect, and compassionate to those worthy of compassion, and to assist them are good works, good deeds. They hold a pleasure and gratification so great they make felt the rewards of the hereafter. And they so increase the respect and compassion they make the person ready to sacrifice his very life. The pleasure and rewards a mother receives through the compassion she feels for her child may be so great she will sacrifice her life due to it. The hen who attacks a lion in order to save her chick is an example of this truth in the animal kingdom. This means that there is an immediate reward in compassion and respect. Magnanimous people of high aspiration feel it, and for this reason assume their heroic attitude. And for example, in greed and wastefulness is such a punishment that, afflicting his heart and spirit, it makes man complaining and anxious and bewilders him. And in jealousy and envy is such an immediate punishment that it scorches the one who feels them. While in contentment and reliance on God is such an immediate, pleasurable reward that it dispels all the pains and tribulations of poverty and indigence. And for example, in pride and conceit is a heavy burden, for the proud man wants respect from everyone. And because he is despised due to this desire, he suffers constant torment. Yes, respect is given, it may not be sought. And for example, in humility and the giving up of egotism is a pleasurable reward by which a person is saved from the heavy burden of trying to make himself liked. And for example, in pessimism and always interpreting things unfavorably is an immediate punishment in this world. In accordance with the rule, whoever strikes is struck. Those who think unfavorably of others are also thought of unfavorably. The actions of those who misinterpret the actions of their believing brothers are also misinterpreted, and they suffer the punishment for it. And so on, all good and bad deeds should be measured according to this yardstick. I beseech divine mercy that those who witness the Qur'anic miraculousness manifested at this time in the Risale-i Nur experience these spiritual pleasures, they will not suffer from bad morals, God willing. Second point. The second of 22 points. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. I created not jinn and mankind except that they might worship me. No sustenance do I require of them, nor do I require that they should feed me. For God is He who gives all sustenance, Lord of power, steadfast forever. For a long time these verses worried my mind, since, according to many Qur'anic commentaries, their apparent meaning did not reflect the Qur'an's elevated miraculousness. I shall now explain briefly three aspects of their extremely beautiful and exalted meanings which proceed from the effulgence of the Qur'an. The first, sometimes Almighty God attributes to Himself certain states that could pertain to His messenger so as to honor and exalt Him. Here too, the verses, I created you for worship, not to give me sustenance and feed me, have this meaning. My messenger does not want a wage, recompense, or reward, or to be fed in return for his duty of messengership and conveying to you the obligations of worship. They refer to the noble messenger upon whom the blessings and peace being given food and sustenance. Otherwise, it would be making known something self-evident and clear and would be incompatible with the Qur'an's miraculous eloquence. The second aspect. Man is excessively preoccupied with his sustenance. So, lest he is deluded into making his winning it a pretext for neglecting worship or making it an excuse, the verse says, "You were created for worship." The result of your creation is worship. Winning sustenance is worship of a sort, from the point of view of its being a divine command. I have undertaken to provide your sustenance and that of your families and animals, my creatures. It pertains to me. You were not created to procure food and sustenance, for I am the provider. I provide the sustenance of my servants, your dependents. So, do not make it an excuse and give up worship. If its meaning is not this, it becomes a statement of the obvious, for to provide the Almighty God with food and sustenance is self-evidently impossible. It is an established rule of rhetoric that if the meaning of a sentence is clear and obvious, it is not that meaning which is intended, but a meaning necessitated by it and dependent on it. For example, if you say to someone, "You are a hafiz," it is stating the obvious. The intended meaning is, "I know that you are a hafiz." You are informing him because he did not know that you knew. Thus, in consequence of this rule, the meaning of the verse in which the prohibition of giving food to Almighty God is a metaphor is this: You were not created in order to produce food for my creatures, which are mine, and the providing of whose sustenance I have undertaken. Your fundamental duty is worship. But to strive to procure sustenance in accordance with my commands is also a sort of worship. The third aspect. In Surah Al-Ikhlas, the apparent meaning of "He begets not, nor is he begotten" is self-evident and obvious. Hence, another meaning is intended which is necessitated by it. That is to say, Almighty God states extremely clearly and self-evidently, "He begets not, nor is he begotten," meaning anyone who has a father and mother cannot be a God, and pre-eternal and post-eternal, to deny the divinity of Jesus, upon whom be peace, and of Uzair, and the angels, and stars, and other false gods. It is just the same with our example, the verse, "The all-glorious provider, your object of worship, does not require sustenance for himself. You were not created to provide him with food," means things with the ability to receive sustenance and food cannot be gods and objects of worship, meaning beings that are in need of sustenance and being provided for are not worthy of worship. Said Nursi. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Or while they slept for their afternoon rest. This was written in connection with Rafat being curious and asking about the word Qailun, slept for their afternoon rest, in the verse, or while they slept for their afternoon rest, and to prevent his diamond-like pen becoming idle in prison and lethargic as a result of sleeping after the morning prayer like the others. Sleep is of three sorts. The first is Qailula. This is from pre-dawn to 40 minutes, or so after the sun has risen, the time when prayer is lawful but reprehensible. Sleep at this time is contrary to the practices of the Prophet, upon whom be blessings and peace, since, according to Hadith, it leads to a decrease in livelihood and its being unfruitful. The most appropriate time for preparing to earn one's living is when it is cool. One is overcome by lethargy when this has passed. It has been established by many experiences that this is both detrimental to the day's labor and indirectly to one's livelihood, and is the cause of unfruitfulness. The second is Feylule. This is from the afternoon prayer till sunset. Sleep at this time leads to a diminution of life, that is, it makes life that day shorter and pass in a state of semi-sleep and drowsiness, thus causing a physical deficiency to life. Moreover, immaterially, since most of the day's results, material and immaterial, become apparent after the afternoon prayer, to pass that time in sleep as though prevents the results being reaped, and the day becomes as though unlived. The third is Kailule, which is in accord with the Prophet's, upon whom be blessings and peace, practices. It is from mid-morning to just past noon. Such sleep is sunnah since it allows a person to rise at night to pray. So too, it is the custom in the Arabian Peninsula to rest from work at noon when it is intensely hot, corroborating this practice of the Prophet, upon whom be blessings and peace. This sleep augments both life and sustenance. For half an hour's Kailula sleep is the equivalent of 2 hours sleep at night. This means it adds 1.5 hours to a person's life every day. It saves 1.5 hours from the hand of sleep, the brother of death, and gives it life, increasing the time of working for one's livelihood. This is good as well. While reciting, endless blessings and endless peace be upon you, O Messenger of God, in the tasbihat following the prayers, I saw from afar a subtle point which gradually unfolded. I was unable to grasp all of it and shall recount 1 or 2 sentences by way of alluding to it. I saw that the world of the night is like a newly opened dwelling of the world. I entered it during Isha, the prayer at nightfall. Since man is connected to all the world through an extraordinary expansion of the imagination, I saw the mighty world that night as a dwelling. Living creatures and men became so tiny they were invisible. I observed with the imagination that the only thing that inhabited the dwelling and made it familiar and filled it with light was the collective personality of Muhammad, upon whom be blessings and peace. As a person greets those present when he enters a house, I was overwhelmed with the desire to say, "Endless peace be upon you, O Messenger of God." Note: the divine mercy received by Muhammad, upon whom be blessings and peace, looks to the needs of all his community through all eternity. For which reason, endless greetings are appropriate. If someone enters a vast house like the world, desolate and empty and dark due to heedlessness, how frightened and dismayed he will be. Then suddenly the house is lit up and a familiar, friendly, lovable and beloved lieutenant appears in the forefront. If he describes and makes known the house's compassionate and generous honor through all its fittings and furnishings, you can understand what joy, familiarity, happiness, light, and ease it will give. From this, you may appreciate the value and pleasure of the greetings for the messenger, upon whom be blessings and peace. It was as though I was greeting him to the number of all man and jinn. That is to say, I offered greetings, meaning I renew my allegiance to you, accept your mission, submit to the laws and commands you brought, and state through the greetings that they will be safe from our assaults, and making speak all the parts of my world, and all jinn and man, all conscious beings, I offer greetings in their name. As he illuminated my world through the light and gift he brought, so he illuminates and fills with bounties the worlds of everyone in this world. In grateful response for the gift, I exclaimed, "Endless blessings be upon you." That is, we cannot respond to this goodness of yours, so we show our gratitude to you by beseeching that mercy be bestowed upon you from our creature's treasury of mercy to the number of the inhabitants of the heavens. I pursued this meaning in my imagination. In respect of his worship, and on account of his being turned from creation to creature, the person of Muhammad, upon whom the blessings and peace, requires blessings which have the meaning of mercy. While, in respect of his messengership and being the envoy sent from creature to creation, he requires peace. He is worthy of peace to the number of jinn and men, and we offer a general renewal of our allegiance to their number. So too, he is worthy of blessings from the treasure of mercy to the number of the inhabitants of the heavens, and in the name of all of them. For it was through the light he brought that the perfections of all things became apparent, and the value of beings was made manifest, and the dominical duties of creatures could be observed, and the divine purposes in creatures were made known. Therefore, if all things uttered verbally what they express through their tongues of disposition, it is certain that they would declare, "Blessings and peace be upon you, O Messenger of God," and we say in the name of all of them, "Endless blessings and endless peace be upon you, O Prophet of God, to the number of jinn and men, and of angels and stars." It is enough that Allah grants him blessings and assigns him peace and benedictions. Said Nursi. My dear brother, you want an explanation of the unity of existence. In one of the flashes of the 31st letter, there is a very powerful and elucidating answer to Muhyiddin's ideas concerning this matter. For now, we just say the following. Teaching this question of the unity of existence to people at the present time causes serious harm. Like when metaphors and similes pass from the hands of the learned to those of the common people, and knowledge passes from scholars to the ignorant, they are taught to be literally true. So, when elevated truths such as the unity of existence pass to the heedless and to the common people submerged in causes, they are taught to be nature and cause very significant instances of harm. Note, just like the two angels called the bull and the fish in connection with certain metaphors were supposed by the common people to be a vast bull and enormous fish. The first, the way of the unity of existence, is quite simply to deny the universe on account of Almighty God. Despite this, when it is adopted by the heedless common people and enters their ideas which are tainted by materialist thoughts in particular, it leads to denial of the Godhead on account of the universe and materiality. The second, the way of the unity of existence rejects the dominicality of anything other than God so vehemently that it denies everything other than God and removes duality. Since it does not recognize the independent existence of anything, let alone that of ill commanding souls, with the predominance of the idea of nature at this time, and pride and egotism inflating the evil commanding soul and causing the hereafter and the creature to be forgotten, to inculcate the unity of existence in people whose ill commanding souls are small far-offs and quite simply are disposed to taking their own selves as their objects of worship, so inflates the evil commanding soul that, I seek refuge with God, it can no longer be contained. The third, while the all-glorious one is free and exempt from, pure of, and exalted above all change, alteration, division, and being comprehended in time or place, the unity of existence gives rise to conceptions that are not fitting for his necessary existence, holiness, and being free of all defect, and leads to false teachings. Yes, if one who speaks of the unity of existence rises in the mind from the ground to the Pleiades, leaves the universe behind, and fixes his gaze on the sublime throne, ecstatically reckoning the universe to be non-existent, through the strength of his belief he may see everything to be directly from the single one of unity. But the person who stands behind the universe and looks at it and sees causes before him and looks from the ground may possibly become submerged in causes and immersed in the swamp of nature. The person who rises in the mind to the divine throne may say like Jalaluddin Rumi, "Listen, the words you hear uttered by everyone, you may hear as uttered by Almighty God, like natural gramophones. But if you say to the one who cannot rise as high as Jalaluddin, nor see all beings from the ground to the divine throne in the form of mirrors, listen, you will hear the divine speech from everything. He will in effect fall from the throne to the ground, and will also be afflicted by false imaginings contrary to the truth. Say, God sent it down, then leave them to plunge in vain discourse and trifling. Glory be to the one whose essence is wholly above anything similar to it, and whose attributes are free of anything resembling them, and whose signs testify to his dominicality. May his glory be exalted, for there is no God but he. Said Nursi.